Hello BookTube, it's Joshua here, and today I'm going to be doing a reading update, which I have not done in a while, not since September, I believe. But yeah, I'll get right into it right away. I'll start with the selected essays by Virginia Woolf. That is the first thing that I read, I think in early October, and it has been a while since I read those, but I just love Virginia Woolf's nonfiction, and um, those essays have really stuck with me since I read them. Um, it's particularly there were a couple of them that I still sometimes think about, and I'll talk about one of them. But just on the whole, Virginia Woolf's nonfiction is so amazing. I've only read one novel of hers, and that was Mrs. Dalloway, and I also loved that. But for her nonfiction, I've read The Common Reader and A Room of One's Own, and now these selected essays. I would really love to read A Writer's Diary next. I think at some point I'll definitely have to get to that. I think it's only like $1 on Kindle, so I should definitely do that at some point. But yeah, these essays were really amazing, all of them. I don't have the cover because I read it on Kindle, but I'll put the cover up on the screen, and yeah, it was separated into different sections. There was one section um, on criticism, on the state of modern criticism in her own day, and another on biography and life writing, and then another on just other topics. I tend to think that, or I found so far that Virginia Woolf really uh, is best when she's writing about other books, when she can draw on all of the literature that she's read in the past, and and just talk about all of that stuff. Whenever she does that, she's so inherently bookish and so eloquent, and it's just wonderful reading. But also when she talks about other things, like she describes a walk through London, and she just kind of describes what she sees, and it's so captivating. Whatever she writes about, it's captivating. She also describes what it's like to ride a plane, except it turns out that by the end of the essay that um, she never did actually ride a plane, or at least that's I don't know if in her life she ever did manage to ride a plane, to sit in a plane, but the way that she writes her essays are just amazing. And there's one essay that I still think about quite a bit, and it was the very last essay in this collection. I can't quite remember the title of it, I'm afraid, but she was reflecting on, well, on the Second World War, um, and it's partially autobiographical because she describes herself as she's writing the essay. I don't know if this was actually the case or if she just included these scenes after for dramatic effect, but she describes herself abruptly having to stop writing to lie down on the ground and take cover from German bombers, um, which is I just thought that was I don't know, really fascinating to read about, and really shocking. But she makes this particular point, or she, I guess, invents this term called Hitlerism, um, and she kind of, I think what she means by that is this ingrained desire in, particularly in a lot of men, for this idea of glory or dominance or greatness, which she thinks has led to the Second World War. And she talks about wanting to cure Hitlerism, um, the Hitlerism that is in men all over the world. And she talks about trying to do that through giving them a creative outlet and focusing on art in society, things like that. And I don't know why that idea of Hitlerism and trying to cure the Hitlerism in all of us in our society, that just really stuck with me for some reason. I'm just rambling. I don't really know if I'm making a good point here, but yeah, I really love her essays and things like that. Stick with things like that term Hitlerism, and so many other parts of her essays have stuck with me. I really loved it. Um, Next up, the book that I read after Virginia Woolf's selected essays was A Room in Athens by Francis Carlen Santamaria. And this was an even more, I think this was even an even more impactful read for me. Ever since I've read it, it has been in the back of my head. It's like part diary, part memoir. Um, and so essentially it's about this. Well, it's about Frances Carlen Santamaria, and her husband going on a year-long trip in Europe. And at the end of that trip, they plan on staying in Greece. Only right before the trip starts, she finds out that she's pregnant, and so they aren't going to cancel the trip. So it turns out so she'll have to give birth to her baby while they're in Athens. Um, and yeah, that is what happens. That she kind of as she goes on this trip, she keeps a diary and writes all kinds of fascinating and beautiful descriptions of what she's observing. And the first part shows her going to a bunch of other European cities, but then she finally makes it into Athens and starts preparing to have her baby in Athens. And she tries to find a natural birth clinic because that is that is the way that she wants to give birth to her baby, rather than in just any old hospital. She wants to do it without anesthesia. And yeah, it's written partly as a diary, and I believe those like she didn't, I don't believe she went back and edited too much of those diary entries. A lot of what you read in the first part, which is framed as diary entries, was what she wrote at the time that she was experiencing them. But then a part of it is also memoir. It kind of switches between the two modes. But nevertheless, they're both forms are very autobiographical, very personal. She talks with a lot of honesty about the experience of being a mother, and she goes through this throughout the book. She goes through this transition from having this fixed image of Athens in her head, which is a very romantic one. It's based off of what she's read in like Lord Byron or movies that she's watched about Greece, or about what friends have told her about this romantic country where you can go swimming and whatnot. I don't know, but she starts off in that state of mind, but then as she goes through the challenges of having a baby in Athens, she's over time very much disillusioned and finds a very different world, and a part of that world is very difficult for her to adapt to. There's a huge element of culture shock, and she has struggles, and she often feels very lonely, but at the same time a part of that world is very beautiful, and she makes friends, and she has I think a really special and memorable experience, and she gives birth to her baby, and a lot of in the second half of the book, a lot of the descriptions are just her taking care of her baby, and probably having thoughts that most mothers have when they have a newborn baby, just kind of like cooing over their child. But I think when I read it, I didn't feel like it was very sappy. I just thought it was very intimate and very personal and sincere, and I really appreciated it for that. And yeah, that's kind of the whole of the book. I think that's what I gathered from it, and I think what made it stuck with me is just the sincerity of it all. So I really loved that read. I would very much like to return back to it at some point. Next up, I have two novels that I want to talk about, both of which I read in different classes at university. I figured I would just include them because why not? It's something more to talk about as well. So the first one, this is an interesting one. It's Absalom by William Faulkner. I had to read this for my American literature class, and it was I went into it when I read the first 10 or so pages. I went into it hating it and thinking, my God, this is the most racist, sexist piece of crap I've ever read. And by the end of it, I still believed that it was one of the most racist and sexist books I've ever read. I'm not entirely ready to completely outright dismiss William Faulkner. I've only read one novel of his, and I think I would like to reread Absalom, and I would like to reread Absalom, to see if there's something that I missed, because I thought that at some points there was some interesting character development, even if all those characters rendered themselves completely um, unlikable, not more than unlikable, completely detestable through their racism, which is just William Faulkner's own racism, I'm pretty sure. Um, but I'm not convinced that there isn't some development of themes that could be of interest. So yeah, I'm not outright dismissing it, but there was a lot of racism and a good amount of sexism too. Just yeah, really not the only. I don't think there was a single depiction of a black person in this novel that wasn't as that of a complete animal. Just every character, whether it's an omniscient narrator speaking or whether it's one of the characters speaking, they always refer to, they always frequently bring up the hard R N word, and they frequently portray black people as just as these rabid beasts, like really, and it's kind of, it's not necessary. It's not in there for any literary reasons. I don't think I didn't sense any of that. I think it was just straight up racism, and also sexism. The sexism was less pronounced, but it was definitely there. Just certain random passages where it's William Faulkner trying to like ponder human nature, and he goes, perhaps women are this, and I'm like, oh my god, it was just very hard. Those parts really made me not like the novel. So yeah, there was a lot of that, which I'm like 99% sure was William Faulkner's own. So yeah, that's Absalom. The next novel that I read was for my French class, and this was an interesting one. It's called La Sainte Paix by André Marois, and it's a kind of a not a comical thriller. I don't know what the exact name for it would be, but it's just essentially this story about an old lady who she finds out that her neighbor, who she hates, is I think she has Parkinson's. The neighbor has Parkinson's and is going to move away. And this old lady, Jacqueline, she likes her piece. That Sainte Paix, I think, roughly translates to like precious peace, or something along those lines, or like saintly peace. And so she doesn't want other people to move into the house after her neighbor moves away, so she kills her neighbor. It's one old lady murdering another, and then Jacqueline essentially just goes on this huge murdering spree, and that's pretty much the whole novel. I don't really think that it was that good, because there wasn't any tension in the novel at all. There were some funny moments where André Marois was trying to be very absurd, and there was comedy in there, but I just don't think, I don't know what else he was trying to explore, and there was no tension. I didn't feel gripped by the novel. It didn't give me anything to think about. It was just this absurd murder spree. So that is how I felt about the novel. And so the next book that I read was the one that I've probably spent the most time on over the past month or two, and I'm not done it yet technically, because it's only the first part. This is Hitler, Hubris, 1889 to 1936 by Ian Kershaw. So I finished this, I think, a week or two ago, and I haven't yet started, or I've only just barely started the second volume. But I'll just talk about this. This covers the years from Hitler's birth up to his gaining power in the Third Reich, and it stops right before the Anschluss, right before he takes sorry, not the Anschluss. It stops right before he takes the Rhineland, before he marches into the Rhineland, and so it covers a lot. This first part is very, very detailed, very intelligently written. There's a very he takes a very cool perspective towards these events, and yet that isn't to say that he avoids moral judgment. He certainly does not, but he doesn't. He avoids anger, and he avoids the blindness that anger can bring. I think he tries to take a look at Hitler's mind and his psychology from a very doctorly point of view, just trying to understand what kind of man this was, and you can't really understand that if you're in a blind rage. So some of the parts that I found that were most interesting, some of the parts that I found most interesting in this book were his descriptions of Hitler's ideology. He dispels the notion that Hitler was just an opportunist, but really he talks about really how Hitler had a few central tenets of his very crude ideology. I could list them off right now. The need for Lebensraum, so plans to invade other countries, essentially. The extermination of Jewish people, and kind of tied into that is a nationalistic, a xenophobic and nationalistic idea of the Aryan race. Those are three, I think, central tenets of his ideology, and there isn't much more than that. There's just very broad kind of goals that Hitler has, and that Kershaw describes how that allows Hitler to adapt to pretty much any circumstance without betraying those goals, because they're so broad and so ill-defined. He can do whatever he wants to get to those goals. Like for example, if he were to have more specific principles laid down for himself, such as refusing to refusing to participate in the parliamentary system in Weimar democracy. If he had that principle, then he would have never been able to have gained power, because in the end, he destroyed Weimar democracy from the inside. But because he just had these few ideological goals, and he had no other principles than that, he had no practical beliefs at all, he was able to do whatever possible to grasp power. And that's what happened. That is what allowed him to adapt so well. But also, interestingly, Kershaw puts maybe even more blame, Kershaw says that the reason why Hitler came to power is not just Hitler himself, but it's the people who were already in power in Weimar democracy. Kershaw essentially explains how most of the people who were in power at the time, most of the conservative right who were in power at that time, they believed that they could contain Hitler, that once they invited him into the government, they would have power over him. But that quickly proved to be not the case. They were completely deluded about what they would be able to do, and they were completely deluded about what kind of person Hitler was. So yeah, I think those two aspects of this biography, Hitler's ideology, and the way that society kind of unconsciously conformed to it, and the way that broad ideology allowed Hitler to gain power unscrupulously. That, and also just the people who allowed Hitler, through a gross mismanagement of a gross disloyalty to Weimar democracy, the people who allowed Hitler to enter into a powerful role in Weimar Germany. Those two were the most interesting things for me. But now I think I'm going to take a break from this biography. There's part 2 up on the shelf there. And and I've just started it, but I'm going to take a little breather, partially just because um, I still have a lot of schoolwork to do, and I want to just focus on that, and also because I want to spend some time reading a couple other things, and then maybe return to this biography after. I'm very much a mood reader, so I've learned that making my reading too programmatic, it just doesn't work. I end up being drawn towards something else, and then only returning to that subject after some time has passed, which I'm fine with. I'm fine with doing that. So I have a break this week, and I've been really enjoying it. It's been a lot of fun, and just yesterday and today, I picked up a short book and just devoured it. I didn't have to worry about any schoolwork, and just like I was able to, for the first time in a while, single-mindedly just bear down on this one book and have and really enjoy it. And that book was Never Cry Wolf by Farley Mowat. I just finished it today. I just sat in the library and read to the end, and this was really an amazing book. It's my very first Farley Mowat. Hopefully it's not my last, because I really love Mowat's voice on the page. It's well written, entertaining, humorous, but also extremely passionate about what he's talking about. Essentially, this book is about Farley Mowat's time spent in the Barren Lands, which I believe is northern Manitoba, and he's commissioned essentially by the Canadian government to study the hunting habits of Arctic wolves. He goes in believing the myth that everyone else believes, that wolves are these bloodthirsty creatures who are single-handedly killing the caribou population of Canada. Of course, as he goes on this expedition, he over time discovers that this is not the case. Wolves are not bloodthirsty creatures, and they are not the ones responsible for killing caribou herds. Of course, it's the humans who are responsible. He meets a fur trader who says that in a given year he'll kill, I think, over 1,000 caribou, because he has to feed his huskies, and the huskies perform way better when they eat caribou meat. He discovers that, and then he thinks back to a report that he read, or a census that he read, in which all the fur traders, all the trappers, claimed that they only killed a couple caribou per year, and instead blamed wolves as the ones killing caribou. But his experience in the field reveals that this is very much not the case. He observes the wolves, and he has numerous close encounters with them, and each time he encounters them, they are humorously disinterested in him, sometimes scornful of him, as if he's not worth their notice. And the way he portrays some of those encounters are quite funny. It is quite funny. It's just him slowly discovering, and writing about it, teaching us about what wolves are really like. He principally observes one family unit of wolves, essentially 3 adult wolves and maybe 4 pups. The father wolf and the mother wolf, he gives them names, George and Angeline, and then there's a third wolf, which he names Uncle Albert. So obviously he grows very fond of these wolves, and develops a connection to them. And he discovers all kinds of things about them, and about how they, when they hunt caribou, well, first of all, they aren't even capable of killing large amounts of caribou. They're only able to hunt down the weak ones, the ones that are sick and ailing, and who can't run as fast. That is what the wolves principally feed off of. And when they kill one of those sick caribou, they eat they store the meat and eat it all, and then only then they go out hunting again, so they don't waste anything either. And in fact, this process is actually good for the caribou. It helps keep caribou. It helps keep the population up because, you know, it's the process of natural selection. It allows the strong caribou to reproduce more, and that means that the population as a whole will thrive. Farley Mowat learns all of this, and but of course the world itself does not learn all of this. That he learns this, but then continues to confront a world that has this irrational prejudice against wolves and views them as these bloodthirsty creatures. As I was reading this, I was remembering the description at the end of Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe, where Robinson Crusoe gets attacked by hordes of wolves, and they're depicted as complete like bloodthirsty villains. It's as if they were orcs from the Lord of the Rings or something, just complete bad guys. Hordes of wolves coming out to murder humans. But after reading this, I mean that can't be that Defoe's description couldn't have been based on fact, and must have just been one more representation of wolves in this completely wrong way. So overall, yeah, this was a very bitter but beautiful and impactful novel. I feel very passionately about this novel. It just reading it over the past 2 days, I already love it. It was such an amazing experience reading this, and I can't wait to read more by Farley Mowat. I'm really excited. I skipped one book. This was a book that I read most recently, but I did also read a biography of Elizabeth II by Sarah Bradford. It's just titled Elizabeth, and I read this on Kindle, so I don't have the physical copy either. But this was a really amazing read. I found this figure of Elizabeth to be really kind of endearing and inspiring, because she had, you know, incredible duties to meet, and she did meet them, and even if that created a lot of problems for her, I mean, you kind of learn about how being thrust up to the to this position as queen creates a certain separation even from her close family members, and she tries to compensate for that in different ways. For example, she lets Philip really take charge in raising their kids because she, you know, feels bad for having to almost usurp his position as the head of the family. Things like that. Her role creates difficulties, but she's always an essentially decent and strong monarch, and she meets her role. And I really enjoyed reading about Elizabeth. And Sarah Bradford, she's really she's an intelligent and very entertaining author, but she never, I don't think she ever once sensationalized the story, because I guess before this biography, I had always viewed, you know, any account of the British monarchy as, I've always viewed it as somewhat gaudy, as somewhat gossipy, just because I'm used to seeing, what was that book? The book by Prince Harry. I can't remember what it's called, but I'm used to just seeing a bunch of drama like that and thinking, oh, this does not seem like my cup of tea at all. But reading this biography by Sarah Bradford, I'm realizing now that there is a way to tell the story of the monarchy, you know, in the 20th century and maybe even in the 21st century, without being, you know, without sounding like a tabloid or something like that. And also, I really want to read more by Sarah Bradford now. I'd really like to read. Actually, let me just pull this out. I have her biography of George VI, Elizabeth's father. This is The Reluctant King. I believe this came out recent. I think there was a reissue of this biography recently where they renamed it to The Dutiful King. I like I like this title better. The Reluctant King sounds somehow more fitting. This is the life and reign of George VI, 1895 to 1952. And I really want to read about this figure because we do get a a brief account of George VI's story in Elizabeth's biography, of course, and it sounds like it's an incredibly moving story or an incredibly powerful story because I mean I can only imagine what was going through his mind. I can only imagine what his position was when his brother abdicates the throne, a complete dereliction of duty, to marry a divorcee, which obviously I don't think in today's world I don't think is a crime, but back then it would have been, or not a crime, but back then it would have been frowned upon, right? And so he would have either had to abandon the throne, abdicate and marry, or stay on the throne and choose someone else to marry. Well, the brother completely abandoned the throne and left his younger brother to, pick up the pieces that he left behind of a monarchy that was in danger. And yeah, again, I can only imagine what George VI would have been going through in that moment. It must have been such a difficult moment, and yet, he did assume the role, and he did end up being a good king. At least that is what I know of the story so far. I don't know the details, so maybe that brief outline of his story was not accurate, but I'm very much intrigued to learn more about this figure, and I know that Sarah Bradford will be a good writer of the story. So yeah, that is one book that I'd like to read in the future. I'd also very much like to read Sea of Slaughter by Farley Mowat. Maybe I'll read this next. I don't know. I'm not sure yet. But Farley Mowat was just so good that I'd really like to read more by him. But yeah, I'm not sure what I'm going to read next, but I'll let you guys know in the next update. Anyway, this video has been long enough, so thank you all for watching, and goodbye.